Wink, wink.
Hi, Spots and Cheap Pops presents your moment in the Valley. Silicon Steve Valli is back with you. We're talking professional wrestling at its very highest regard.
And Bret Hart is frustrated.
Frustrated isn't a goddamn word for it.
What do you think of Jon Moxley?
This is bullshit.
And god damn it, what do you do when you've been watching professional wrestling for about 40 years and one of your absolute favorite wrestlers of all time basically calls one of your favorite wrestlers today a big piece of shit? Well, you try to put it in perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking Bret the Hitman Hart, one of my favorite, probably bell to bell my favorite of all time. And of course, talking about Jon Moxley. And I say Moxley is one of my favorites before we get into the comments and everything. I say that with this. I don't love deathmatch wrestling. And here's the other thing about Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley has proven that he can wrestle in many, many different kinds of styles. He can go out and have a really good technical match, or go out and have a strong style match, or go out and have a death match. The guy can pretty much do it all, and he tells good stories. And what Jon Moxley doesn't fake is his passion and love for the business. His passion and love for everything that happens when he's on screen, what he's doing in the back when it comes to pro wrestling. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Bret the Hitman Hart had some rather biting comments for AEW and specifically Jon Moxley. And the recently turned heel Jon Moxley, of course, has brought a lot more ultra-violent stuff happening to AEW and to professional wrestling in general. It's not just in AEW. He obviously was in Game Changer Wrestling and Revolver Wrestling and doing a lot of dangerous deathmatch type stuff, really since he left WWE. Jon Moxley loves that version of pro wrestling. And there are many that say that it's not real wrestling. Well, let's get into exactly what Bret the Hitman Hart said in this instance. Here's the quote.
Sadly, it's getting too phony. I really question the direction that the people that are in charge are taking wrestling. AEW has gone in a bad direction with all the violence and gore. I watched an episode, Dr. Martha Hart doing her big press conference.
All right, I'm going to stop it right there. There's a lot of bad blood between Martha Hart and Bret the Hitman Hart and the Hart family. The Hart family, from what I can tell, let bygones be bygones. Let Owen Hart be honored in WWE, a much bigger platform, a big payday probably for the entire family has something to do with it, but I don't want to speculate. That's family shit. But there is a little bit of disdain there, just so we're aware. I mean, he definitely has had a lot of biting words for his brother's widow. That is for darn sure. So there's a little bit of politicking there. Well, I wouldn't say politicking, but there's definitely a skewed view of things. He already has a shit sandwich in his mouth before he even starts watching. He continues, though.
I'm watching AEW, and who used to be Dean Ambrose is sticking a fork in somebody's head for 5 minutes with a close-up. This isn't wrestling. I would recommend turning all that off and not watching because it's not very good. Wrestling is going in bad directions because people don't know what wrestling is or was.
Pardon my voice. I was trying to be Bret Hart, but not really. I got to work on my Canadian accent. Kind of digest it. I think people are blowing it up like he's specifically talking about like Moxley sucks. The thing that he said,
I'm watching AEW and the guy who used to be Dean Ambrose is sticking a fork in somebody's head for 5 minutes with a close-up.
So this is why the comment was probably taken the wrong way. First of all, Bret has no fucks to give. And he can say that he's not angry or bitter anymore, but the reality is that he probably still has a little bit of that. I think the Martha Hart thing and how AEW kind of really partnered and buddied up with her during the Owen Hart Cup, I think is part of this. I really, really do, folks, unfortunately. However, it might not be. I'm not going to kill Bret because I'm not going to kill Bret. I think the big problem is he said this. He said the guy who used to be Dean Ambrose. And that, to me, is a little disrespectful. It's a little shade. Like, he's not shit without being Dean Ambrose. That's why that kind of shade by Bret Hart, he didn't need to do that. He didn't even need to bring up Dr. Martha Hart's press conference. So he obviously has an issue there. And I'm very certain Jon Moxley, when Martha Hart was doing her press conference a year or so ago, That wasn't an episode Moxley was gouging the dude's face with a fork. He brought up the Martha Hart thing because there's bad blood there. It's clear. Just do your own research. I'm not going to get into specifics, but there's bad blood between Martha Hart and Bret Hart. So he comes out leading with that, and then he says the guy who used to be Dean Ambrose. Those are the two things that makes this comment kind of jerked off. Other than that, I kind of agree with him 100%. Seeing someone get jabbed with any kind of weapon for 5 minutes isn't fun for me. Or just seeing someone getting punched over and over for 5 minutes. That gets boring fast these days, unless you're really, really good at it and you're telling a great story. Too many times we go right to the gore, and the gore doesn't mean as much in Moxley matches. But damn it, when he does it right, he's one of the best ever. And he's probably, in terms of deathmatch, he's probably the most popular ever, outside of Mick Foley, but in terms of recent, and more importantly, Jon Moxley, he has a lot of Mick Foley in him, where he has been a big purveyor of bringing that style of wrestling to the forefront. But this is what I akin it to. If anyone knows me, I am a monster Grateful Dead fan. Jerry Garcia is amazing. He's one of my heroes. Not just what he did as a musician, but as he did as a person, and the way his philosophies and a lot of the things about Jerry Garcia I love. But I heard a couple quotes from him about hip hop, rap.
I mean, it isn't music, it's talking. That's what it says, rap. Rap means talking. It's not music. It's talking in meter. It's got rhyme, and it's got, it's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I have no problem with it. It just isn't music.
All right. So if you hear that, Jerry Garcia, one of my all-time heroes, one of my all-time favorite musicians and people that ever lived on this planet, but he says rap is not music. He says he has no problem with it. It's fine, but it's not music. Music you can get better at. Rap, I don't know if you can get better at it. I mean, I have a Wu-Tang Clan tattoo on my leg. You're going to tell me that music touches me. And for me, that is music. I think most people would disagree that it's not music. Is it good music? Well, that's the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't find any popular rap the last 15 or 20 years, not any, but most popular rap to be even listenable. So I get where Jerry's coming from to a certain extent, because I feel the same way about hip hop and rap today. But you can't tell me you listen to Biggie, you listen to Tupac, you listen to Wu-Tang Clan. I have a lot of love and respect for Jerry, and I understand where he was coming from, particularly when he was interviewed. This was like the late 80s, early 90s. Now, Bret Hart, I don't think he meant Jon Moxley specifically. I don't think he thinks Jon Moxley's shitty, but he throws shade at him by calling him, he used to be Dean Ambrose. There's no reason to bring up Dean Ambrose. Jon Moxley has sowed enough of a legacy where he doesn't have to hear about Dean Ambrose anymore. Bret Hart knew what he was doing, and he threw shade at Jon Moxley intentionally for whatever reason. Maybe Jon Moxley was just getting the brunt for Bret Hart's frustration for where wrestling is going. Okay. But he didn't have to do it. That was not super classy of the Hitman. You could bury that kind of wrestling all day. You can. But to say, oh, the guy who used to be Dean Ambrose, that's where there's a problem with this quote. Because overall, by and large, I agree with him. He mentioned something about watching a WWE event where someone jumped off a top rope, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said about 20 guys knocked over like a bowling pin. That is stupid to me too. I get it. And Bret Hart, again, is one of my favorite all-time bell-to-bell wrestlers. I can go back and watch a Bret Hart match right now, and I'd be fine with it, because his matches, first of all, they hold up better than any of his contemporaries. And Bret Hart's matches still hold up beautifully today because they look like they're real fights, and you feel the competition of the moment and plus the story he was telling. But that's Bret Hart. And I think there's enough guys in today's generation, and he said something from top to bottom, they're all bad. He said something of that nature too, when he was referring to WWE and AEW, mid-card talent, top talent, and all that. He was saying that none of them really know what wrestling is. And I think that's absolutely wrong. There are plenty of great professional wrestlers, and a lot of them are young, great professional wrestlers. But there's tons out there that tell some great stories. And there's tons that are going to continue to tell great stories. So I disagree with Bret there. And I disagree with, again, saying the thing about Ambrose. But other than his opinion on that kind of wrestling, I totally understand that. And I'm not going to sit here and say Bret's out of touch. He comes from a prior generation. And we can sit here till we're blue in the face and argue which one is better and which one isn't. You got a guy like Bully Ray going out there and saying technical wrestling is boring back in the late 2000s when he was on top on TNA. Technical wrestling isn't boring if you love professional wrestling. Bully Ray was never a good technical wrestler, so Bully Ray doesn't like it because he could never do it.
Thank you so much for watching High Spots and Cheap Pop Presents Your Moment in the Valley. Please hit the subscribe button and interact. Let us know what you think. And we'll see you next time on High Spots and Cheap Pops. Here endeth the lesson.